really do have to come to that place, what we just sang. I mean, until we get to that place, well, let me say that a different way. Here's the best illustration of that. Okay, I'm not hanging my kids out to dry here, but so Friday, Terry texted me, "Would you please come home?" And she's had to weather some of those storms alone. And so Friday I go, "Yeah, I'll go home." So I went home, and sure enough, it was going to get bad. And so we're watching the weather, and you know, Terry and I have all the plan. Well, we have a couple of kids that said, "Oh, nothing's going to happen. They always say this." And so forcefully I said, "Now," you know, that kind of thing. So we're in there, and Mary and Brooks had these little soft chairs, and Mary's is pink polka dots, and I put it on top of my head goofing off, and they were laughing. It looked like a mushroom on top of my head. And so that's what I had on my head, and we all had this stuff piled in, and the two that think they know it all were just like the last ones in, and sure enough, here it came. And they got it. They got it that, oh wow, that is real. That's what, when I sing this song, for years I played. For years I was my two teenagers that knew it all, and that doesn't apply to me. And then all of a sudden life happens, and hurt and pain and disappointment and loss and sin, deep sin, that when you come to that place when you go, "God, I have broken your heart and I'm so sorry." When it becomes more than, like my two teenagers, "Forgive me my sins," when it becomes, "Oh God, I've broken your heart." Does that make sense? And so we got to come to that place. And today I'm at that place where when I sing, "God, I'm desperate for you, and without you I am lost." Does that make sense? Let's come to that place. I mean, we can't come unless He draws us. I get that. And sometimes He draws us kicking and screaming. Get in this room, Annie Grace. Put the dumb pillow on your head and hunker down, because it's coming. You don't know it all. And so we can come as He draws. I can come willingly, or I can let Him do what He's got to do. But He's going to bring me to the place of desperation. And it's a wonderful, wonderful place. Outside of that place is frightening. And it's so, there were so many pictures, and I know you've got some stories, and I wish we had time to just stop and share those. But Mary, it's her first time through those kind of things, and she was fearful and like on the verge of frightful. And so Terry and I are going, okay, I want her to be fearful, be very afraid of this, but I don't want you to be frightful where you open a door to where the enemy can just have a heyday with you. I don't know if that makes sense, but, and so, you know, we're gathering them in going, be very, very afraid, but at the same time, be very, very confident in who He is. So all that, I'm back now to when we sang "It Is Well With My Soul." The story on that, I think I'm right, is the guy that wrote it lost his family at sea. And later, years later, he was going back, and in the very spot where he lost his family, he pens the words, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrow like sea billows roll, whatever my lot." Losing my family, losing my business, my resources, my reputation, whatever it is, whatever my lot, Thou hast taught me to say, "It is well with my..." Listen, only desperate people say that. Only people that know their utter desperation can go, "It is well with my soul." God, whatever you bring to my life, it will be well with me. Does that make sense? that's what we're going to talk about today, because you're going to see this picture. It's just amazing. All right, so if you have your Bible, start turning to 2 Samuel. Thanks, Chair. This is like, remember that search? I'm going to show my age. The kids are going to go, that's dumb. Remember this commercial? Two mints in one. Remember that? Yeah. This sermon is 2 in 1. Listen to you, Tony Powell. I don't remember that. Give me a break. So this is two sermons in one, but it's going to make sense, okay? So stay with me here, all right? I told you last week, this passage where we are, I am just fascinated with. You're doing good, Michael. You're still looking at me. Yeah. Michael and I spent some time a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling him about this book that Terry and I just loved, and he goes, I want to read that. So Terry ordered him a copy on Amazon, and I gave it to him, and he goes, okay, I don't know if I'll be listening to you today. So I'm watching you. All right. So anyway, I've just been fascinated by this little story that's going on inside of a story. And I don't think I'm stretching it too far here. I got to show you, and there are 2 things I want to show you that are kind of different, but they'll go together, all right? So the first idea is this. It's like the desperate thing. It's like what we were just talking about. There really are 2 planes of living. Another way to say that is, I didn't have time Friday or yesterday because we were cleaning up, but I wanted to go get all of us those cardboard 3D glasses. Because there is a dimension, there's a dimension of seeing things spiritually that is not just what we see natural. So I'm trying to, so whichever one of those fits for you, 2 planes or a 3-dimensional kind of deal. And that's what we're going to see here. There's a way to look at life just in the natural thing, but there's another way when you say, it is well with my soul. So here's how we're going to do that. All right. Let me give you just a couple of background scriptures before we dive into 2 Samuel chapter 16. The first one is this, and you'll be familiar with it. Ephesians chapter 6, 10 through 12. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power, and put on the full armor of God, that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. And then here it is. For our struggle is not with flesh and blood. Our struggle is not... So Paul is saying here there's 2 planes. There's a flesh and blood plane. Our struggle is not with flesh and blood, but it is on another plane. And he says, but against the powers of this dark world and the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. There's another passage that we looked at last year at some time. We were studying through the book of Nehemiah. Remember, Nehemiah came to Jerusalem and rebuilt the wall. And in chapter 6. In chapter 6 of Nehemiah, you don't have to go there, but so he's finishing the wall, the gates have not been installed yet, and then Sanballat and Tobiah, these 2 guys who have they've been hammering him. Just, you can't do this and you can't do that. Anyway, so they call for him and they say this, come down from where you are, come down to the plain of Ono where we are, and let's discuss this. So here's this, again, it's a little different picture of Nehemiah was here, and there were people in this plain trying to go, we want to bring you down to the flesh and blood to have this conversation. Okay, one more, and we're almost there. Romans 8:28, you've quoted that a gazillion times, but even that has this whole idea of there's another level, another way to look at things. Somebody quote that. Romans 8:28. For we know that all things work together for good. How is that? The tornado Friday? That's going to work for my good. All things work together for good for those who love God and called according to His purpose. Okay. In Genesis, remember Joseph's brothers. Well, that was last week, so I better not get mixed up. Joseph's brothers, remember? Okay, so they hated him, they were jealous, they were critical, they mocked him, they belittled who he was, they plotted against him, they lied about him, and they sell him to this band of gypsies going through. He's sold in another country, and it looks like his entire life has been altered. Remember? So he gets there, he gets thrown in prison because he was falsely accused of something he did supposedly with somebody's wife. He gets thrown in prison, this whole thing, and it looks like his life is over. And remember what he says when he reveals himself to his brothers? You meant this for my harm, but God meant this for my good. In chapter 45 of that, and then we'll jump in our passage. And listen to chapter 45 of Genesis, starting in verse 1. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I'm Joseph, it's me. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers were not able to answer because they were terrified at his presence. You think? Okay. And then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." Oh no, he's going to lop our heads off. "Come close to me, brothers." And when they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, who you sold into Egypt. And now, don't be distressed. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me here." Watch this. Watch him go from here to here. Watch this. Don't be angry with yourselves for what you did here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. What? It was to save lives. See, in the natural, it's like his jealous brothers sold him to make some money, and they took the coat of many colors that Dolly Parton sang about and put blood on it, and Daddy. All of that happened here, and Joseph's going, no. It was God the whole time. It was God that sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there's been a famine, and for the next 5 years there will not be plowing and reaping, but God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth, to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, brothers, it was not you who sent me here, but God. Wow. Okay, now with all of that in mind, 2 Samuel chapter 16. Okay, quick lesson to catch you up. David, remember, had been the king. They made him king after he killed Goliath. The Spirit of God left Saul. Samuel anointed David, the Spirit of God, and David led the nation. And then his sin with Bathsheba and getting Uriah killed and that whole thing. And then it just kind of begins to fall apart a little bit. And his son, Absalom, in the last chapter, remember, Absalom had rebelled. He had gone in a far country, and we spent a couple of weeks talking about that, about how God devises to bring back the banished ones, which is so beautiful. And so Absalom now, remember, Absalom has just been sitting at the city gate as people are coming into town. You know what? If you would make me king, and he starts beginning to steal the heart of the people, right? And so finally David gets word Absalom has taken the throne, and David begins his exodus, his exile out of the city. And I mentioned this last week, and here's kind of where we're going to camp today, all right? So in verse 5, as King David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, the son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops and the special guard were on David's right and left. Okay, remember, he's got 600 men with him. Right? 600 men that came from Gath, and they were these incredible warriors. And if you read later in the story about these 600, they were bad. I mean, they were mighty warriors. And here's this little guy chunking dirt clods at him, and these warriors are on his right and left. And as he cursed, Shimei said, get out, you man of blood, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. The Lord has handed the kingdom over to your son Absalom. You have come to ruin because you are a man of blood. Okay, let's stop right there. And this is the second half of the 2 in 1. Okay, I'm going to jump to this one and then come back. I want you to listen to what Shimei says, but I want you to hear the voice of our enemy. Okay, we read about, and Paul said, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers. And Paul is saying there is a warfare, a spiritual warfare going on in our life. And whether, I know that this isn't talked about a whole lot in the Baptist church, it's okay. We need to. You have an enemy, and he is real. Peter says he is like a lion seeking to devour us. I mean, it's a scriptural thing we have to pay attention to. So I want you to hear the words of Shimei and how Satan will speak the same way to us. Okay? So we're going to look at these words. Get out! Get out! Okay, let's stop right there. See, he wants you to run. Okay, so Shimei knew of David and Bathsheba's sin. And in a minute, when we get back to the other half of the sermon, what I'm going to show you is that he uses this one event to he takes one little slice out of David's life, and Satan does this too. He takes a slice out of your life and goes, that's who you really are. And instead of the whole picture, he takes one little slice and goes, see, because of that event, instead of this whole thing, instead of that, run away. You've blown it. You don't belong. Listen, see if some of you have heard this. You don't belong. You'll never measure up now. You've blown it. You won't be anything anymore. You don't deserve to be here. You're finished. You have forfeited your rights. See what you've done? Remember in Home Alone when the uncle, whatever, goes, look what you did, you little jerk. Remember that? Okay, never mind. All right. I guess y'all haven't watched that as many times as we have. Another one that comes to mind is how Scar, in The Lion King, when he talks to Simba, the little one, after his daddy gets killed, and Scar comes along and goes, look what you've done. Run far, far away. And he takes off and he runs, and he lives that way, thinking he's heard this voice, run away. You have blown it. It's all your fault. Has anybody else ever heard that? Yeah, you have. Run away. Run. You have, Mary? Okay. And then he goes, run. You get out, you man of blood, you scoundrel. Okay, so he bless you. He's coming into the name calling. Calling names, twisting the truth. The enemy twists the truth so badly. Get out, you man of blood. He wasn't a man of blood. Where did that come from? See, Shimei thinks that because he's of the house of Saul, that David was responsible for the entire house of Saul. Well, if you look back, and we've looked at it for weeks and weeks and several months, David did everything he could to protect the house of Saul. Remember? He had over and over and over, he had times when he could have killed him. And his men wanted to. Let me go drive a spear through his chest. No. David protected. And so Shimei, and Satan does the same thing. He twists the truth. Yeah, Saul's dead, but David was not responsible. Get out, you scoundrel, you man of blood. He's making these accusations, and there's shame, and there's blame, and he degrades That's what's going on here. He's trying to cause David to get under this, to wear this cloak of shame and blame for something he had nothing to do with. And the enemy wants that for you. To wrap you in this, here Tony, wear this cloak of shame because of what you've done. Does that make sense? Okay. He's also trying to make his failure his identity. Listen, your failure, where you have come up short, a sin in your life or whatever, that is not your identity. Okay, well, we've talked about that before. I won't go there. Okay, then he says, "Get out, you man of blood, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you." Wow, boy, we've bought into that one big time. See, he's bringing in this false concept of God. Now, Hebrews 12, we're not going to go there, but just write it down. You can look it up. Hebrews 12 does talk about this punishment of God, but it's not a punishment for punishment's sake. It's a discipline. And the writer of Hebrews goes on to say, God does discipline, just like a good father does his son, and the son respects him for it. But there is a discipline of God which brings us back to this place of redemption and restoration. So there is this, but this whole concept of you got what you deserve. God did that to you because you did this. And I mean, the enemy just takes this truth and twists it so bad, and now we've got this whacked concept of God, like He's mad, and because I did that, He's punishing me, and that's why my child is crippled, or that's why my marriage fell apart, or that's why this, because God punished me. That's why the tornado hit my house and not your house, because God is punishing me. What? Really? Where did that come from? The pit of hell. That's why we have to know the truth. I'm going to sound like the preacher a minute. You've got to be in your Word. You have to be. If this is it for your spiritual life, I'm sorry to tell you, you're in trouble. You're a sitting duck for the Shimei of hell to say, God has repaid. I mean, He takes the truth and twists them, and some of us are walking around just all crippled up because we don't understand. We've got to know the Word of God to go, wait a minute, that's false. God doesn't, I didn't lose a child because I, did something 50 years ago. What? God doesn't do that. He disciplines, and for some of us, it's severe. But in the behind discipline is love and restoration and redemption. So Shimei is going, you man of blood, the Lord has repaid you for all of the blood you shed. He didn't shed any blood. Okay? For the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And then he says, the Lord has handed the kingdom over to your son Absalom. I mean, these first things, get out, scandal, all that, that's like scratching. But when he goes, God has handed your kingdom over to your son Absalom, it's like, boom, I'm stabbing you in this deep, deep spot. The Lord has handed the kingdom over. Here's what he's saying. See, David, you were responsible for that kingdom one time, but you blew it. You were responsible for the kingdom, but that kingdom crumbled. Let me bring it close to home. See, the enemy would say to you, oh, you had a kingdom one time, a family, and you blew it, Dad. You're responsible for the marriage that fell apart. You're responsible for your child that twisted off and went off into la-la land in rebellion and all that. See, you had a chance, and God's taken that kingdom. What? Okay. The Lord has handed the kingdom over to your son Absalom, and he's just digging at him. And then he says, you have come to ruin because you are a man of blood. What he's saying is, what you've done is irreparable. The enemy would have you believe that what you've done, the sin, whatever, that your life will never amount to anything, that it's irreparable and it can't be fixed, it can't be redeemed, you've gone too far away, you've blown it too badly, and God can never redeem and restore. That's what he would have you believe. That's what, so, I mean, I was teasing last week about him kicking dirt clods and throwing rocks and stuff. Listen, the rocks the enemy throws are like brutal. And we take them in and we embrace them and entertain them. And he says things like, from this day forward, you will be a defilement in the body of Christ. What? I'm going to just pull back and just let you see something in me. Terry and I had walked through a thing in a church situation. It was horrible. And we had this, people came and you know, we had this big counseling powwow thing, and that word was spoken. Ultimately what it was is because we wouldn't kiss up to some people who had a lot of money that wanted to control things, and I just wouldn't do it. I don't play that anyway. And so, you know, all this power thing went on with money and all this, and I wouldn't cave in. And so they bring these people in and for this deal, and you know, and this man says, from this day on, you will be a defilement in the kingdom. And for like 5 years or more, we lived under that. And it's just amazing what we see. The enemy will have people say to you what he is trying to do to you. Does that make sense? And so a sentence like that, and you latch on, and it cripples, and it keeps you from living who God has called you to be. That's what's going on here. The kingdom has been handed over because you have come to ruin because you're a man of blood, and these accusations and all of this. All right. Put a deal right there, 2 minutes in one. We're going to go back to this, and then I'm going to grab at the very end, all right? Okay, so then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head. Here's Abishai living on this plain. Okay? Now watch what David's fixing to say, all right? The truth is, the guy ought to have his head cut off. I mean, in the Levitical law and what was going on, you don't blaspheme the king. And he is still the king, and you don't do that, you lose your life for that very thing. And so in the natural, well, that's what he deserved. He deserved for Abishai to cut his head off. Okay? But the king says, Abishai, what do we have in common? You and I are not, we don't, what do I have in common with you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord said to him, curse David, then who can ask, why do you do this? Do you see? David's seeing it on a different thing. Abishai heard the voice of Shimei. He heard him cursing David. He heard David seemed deaf to the curses. He didn't hear it at all. I mean, he probably, I'm sure he heard it audibly, but he didn't hear it in here. He heard something totally different. Why? Because he was on this plane of, we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. It's like this other realm. It's like this 3D thing that he's in. Okay? Abishai saw the stones as instruments against King David. David saw not the stones, he saw who was throwing the stones from another place. And he's saying, if this is from God, when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say that that stone is coming from the hand of God, not from this little rat. And whatever my lot, it is well with my soul. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay. Come on, you got to wake up. So David looked beyond. David looked beyond this little cussing dead dog guy, Shimei, and he looked beyond him to the all-seeing, all-holy, almighty. And David looked. He looked higher to not just the Shimei's hand, but to another hand. And he's going, God, what are you trying to say to me in this? See, we live life, when we live life on this plane, we get defensive, we bow up, we like, I'll show you, all this. And we're being reminded here today, it's like back up and go, God, what are you saying? What are you saying in my financial situation right now? Okay, the economy's bad. I get that. Listen, God is not confined to the economy of the American dream. Okay, I've got to break the news to you. God could care less about the American dream. Seriously. And so we get under all this stuff and go, man, the economy's bad. Listen, whoa, stop. Put the rocks down. Stop trying to cut off Shimei's head and back up and go, I want to look beyond. I want to look through the visible to the invisible. So I back up and I go, God, what are you saying? What are you saying to me? If this is the economy, then Father, you promised that you would meet my needs. But if it's more than that, is it a job change? Are you trying to teach me something? Do we need to rearrange things? I mean, God, I want to look past what I see in the natural to the supernatural. I want to look past the visible to the invisible to find out what you're saying. Does that make sense? We have to get this, okay? Living life on this plane, just playing church and coming at 9 o'clock and staying and putting our little tithe in and then just forgetting it all for 7 days and coming. Listen, that's living on this and I mean, I'm telling you, the minute you walk out of here until the minute you walk back, it's Shimei going, run, run, you scoundrel. I mean, it's just the attack. And we've got to understand, it's like, okay, I'm backing up going, okay, God, there's something bigger than this. And that's what David's doing. He's seeing it's higher. It was God. God was working here, and God had a divine purpose. That's what David's trying to figure out. And he says, who can curse? Basically, he's saying, who can curse when the holy will of God is doing its work? Why would I want to curse that? David was absorbed in something bigger than himself. He was absorbed in a story much bigger than his story. Life for him was more than what he saw with his eye. It was like he didn't just see that Shimei as this guy that was slandering him, with this vindictiveness. I guess that's the word. Rather, he saw the hand of God accomplishing things in his life because of the mercy of God. Yeah, my son Absalom. Yeah, I mean, this could be a result of my sin. Yes, but God, what are you saying? Listen, we have to learn to push the pause button, and go push the pause button and back up and go, okay, time out. God, what are you saying? What are you doing? How are you directing me? What's going on? Instead of just keep living like we're living. Okay. So David kept his place, and he preserved the purity. He didn't lash out. He didn't return anger for anger. I mean, he could have. He could just, he had every right to. He's the king. He's being blasphemed and all that, and yet he didn't. What was happening? Listen, what was happening to him right now? Listen carefully to this sentence. What was happening to him right now was for another time and another place. I mean, try to get your head around that one. What was going on right here was not just for here. It was about another time and another place. And there would come a day, and we're going to get there, when David gets the kingdom back. Yeah. See, what God is doing in me today, maybe it's for today. But my hunch is it's for another time. It's God's fashioning something in me. He's doing something deep down inside of me that's I won't understand today, but one day. Terry and I had this pecan tree in our yard in Texas, this monstrous tree. It was the most beautiful thing. We had 17 pecan trees on our property. It was just, but this one was this special, and we would sit out there, we would sit together and hold hands. I mean, we're just sitting there going, God, I don't understand. There's something deep going on in me. God, I sense you doing a deep work, and I can't put my finger on it, but oh God, I just want you to know I'm yours. And I want you to know that what you're doing in me for one day, God, do it. Do it in me today. Do this hard work, whatever you're doing in us. And I mean, we would cry and pray to the Lord, and we were fasting and going, God, I don't know what it is, but Lord, I want you. I'm desperate for you. That's why when we sang that, God, I'm desperate for you. Because what was going on? It was for a day that I didn't understand yet. And God is doing something in you today that may be for today, but it may be for who knows when. But let Him do His thing. Don't miss it by going, la-di-da, I'm going to live on this plane. I'm going to do my little deal. Listen, I mean, I know we got to live life. I'm not, I've got to go to work tomorrow, and I've got to do this, and I've got bills to pay, and I've got baseball games, and I got a mess still to clean up from a tornado. And I mean, I have to do those things. And yet, there's something much bigger than that. Does that make sense? Okay, almost done. So he kept his place. He preserved his purity and he preserved the simplicity of his heart. And he did not answer the angry man. He didn't answer him according to his anger. His concentration was on mercy.